we're going to compare two verses. The one that talks about the son of Yafet, that's 10, Perek Yud Pasuk Beit, 10/2 on page 100. So we're separating this issue out of progeny from the story of the flood. So B'nai Yafet gets the munach to start out the word B'nai, because it's going to separate out from the issues of the flood. But it's going to focus on Yafet and say these are the good and bad things that he did, so he gets this double idea. We are saying that he, again, takes his choice of where he wants to expand to based on where he started. We are going to move on to 10/6, Breshit Yud Pasuk Vav, Uvnei Cham. Similarly, Cham are going to expand in the same manner that Yefet did. They're going to pick a starting point, and then they're going to make their territory based on them predetermining their destiny. However, when we get to our pasuk that we're working on now, 10/21, page 115, Ulashem is going to have a mercha. It's going to be lightly connected to what was coming from before, but mostly moving forward into what's going to go on. So he is not acting the same way that the other two sons did in terms of determining things through his own volition. Rather, we're interpreting, because we're using the mercha here, because we're not giving him a separation that defines him as necessarily a master of his destiny. He is going to get the quote-unquote leftovers and expand from where he is to the places that were available to him. Yulad, number 2, was born with a tipcha, with a small pause after it. Like Yefet and Cham, an offspring was born to Shem, who modulated the inclinations of their characters by their respective dispositions, similar to their originator, as conveyed by the closing shape of the corresponding reading mark. So their births reflect back on their origin from Shem. So that's why we're using a tipcha here. And we realize that the births form another generation, but the generation is still focused on the characteristics that Shem was trying to inculcate into them. Gamhu, also he, with the stabilizing and perhaps slightly elevating etnachta, number 3. Not only did he contribute a quantitative increase of people in various lands, but also he added spiritual qualities to the society, thus effecting an improvement of human beings, as denoted by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark and by the meaning of gum also. So it's not just that children were born, it's that children were born with a purpose and with a focus on trying to elevate. Avi, with a pashta, a father of. So this is going to emphasize the word slightly, but move us forward to what goes on. Number 4, Shem was a father of different kinds of people in comparison with the clans deriving from his older brothers, as suggested by the directional shape of the reading mark. So this is a connecting note. It's going to allow us to say that he was a quote-unquote connected father rather than a separate influence with not so much involvement. Kol b'nei Ever, all sons of Ever, with a katon, so a 2-part note on it. Number 5, the true personality of Shem became apparent later, starting from his 3rd generation, by the emergence of all sons of Ever, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So the question is, why do we skip generations and talk about Ever? And because it's what was there originally is something that is going to be inculcated into the generations even after a while. Achi, a brother of, with a tipcha, so this is going to focus us back on what we said. So he's going to be something that really starts to influence the world by the time you get to the generation of Aver, by the time you get to the third generation. Number 6, since then Shem had established his own imprint by the pattern of living of his descendant, and he indicated that he was only a brother of his older siblings because of common parents, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So his influence on Bnei Aver is much more importantly the fact that he is himself, and not so much that he is the brother of Ham and Yefet. Yefet, so because we've had a tipcha, this is a note that has a pause for a brother of, so Yefet is going to be separated out from the phrase Achi, and yet it's going to be lightly connected. So both in terms of the influence of Yefet, it's going to have a connection, and in terms of Achi, the idea of being a brother, the brotherly connection between Shem and Yefet is going to be distinguished as well. So number 7, the characteristics of Yefet were dexterity and physical beauty, all pertaining to the ground. The limits for Shem were the heavens, as expressed by the directional shape of the reading mark. So that was a little, when I read through that, I wasn't quite sure what he was trying to express. I get the idea of there being both a separation in terms of Shem's characteristics and a connection that Yefet was trying to have with him, or at least there's a family connection, but I'm not quite sure about the idea of this being something pointing towards heaven, because this is a lower note.
Yeah.
And it was beyond my ability to find a reason that he interpreted it this way, but perhaps with further thought we might get more insight into it. Hagadol, the great, with the stabilizing self pasuk, along with excellence in performance and science, Yefet was considered the great because his work and occupation also boosted his physical power and exterior looks. We are on page 115, Breshit Yud, Pasuk Kaf Aleph, 10:21, and we're just finishing off the sentence by talking about the fact that the sons of that Shem in and of himself was trying to make a separate path from the other two brothers, and although Yefet looked for beauty in the world and made fame for himself that way through physical power and exterior looks, this was something that was separated from Shem's basic purpose by the fact that Achi, being the brother of, has the tipcha which pauses after. So I think the most significant note in this sentence is number 6, a brother of with the tipcha. We're going to read through the sentence. Shem yulad gamhu avi kol b'nei Aver achi Yefet hagadol. And we're going to continue on, 1022, page 116. B'nei, sons of. This is a mercha, so it's lightly connected to what's gone on from before, but mostly pushing us forward into what's going to go after. Although the descendants eventually built their own families and clans, they had similar mentalities. As sons of a common originator, as indicated by the directional shape of the reading mark. So the influence on them is going to be mostly because they are sons of. That is going to be one of their determining moral characteristics, if you will. Shem with a tipcha, so this is going to close the phrase and also pause after it. By their adherence to the principles of Shem, they were exponents of his ideology, as shown by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. So the philosophy that he's going to espouse is going to be inculcated into his children and be something that defines them as well. Elam, so we're going to start on the list of sons' names now. So because we're starting on the list, there is a separation from Shem himself, and they're going to at least have something of their own path in the world. So we get the separating note with a munach, which separates us from what's gone before and moving forward. Number 3, Elam settled many of the Zagros mountains southeast of Mesopotamia, as stressed by the shape of the reading mark. And again, what we're trying to express in some of these sentences is the directional pointing of the note also implies a direction on a map. So we don't have a starting point here, but we are definitely pointing in a direction. The Ashur and Ashur, so this has the stabilizing et nachta, and perhaps something that's a little bit elevated about it. Number 4, northwest of Elam settled another brother, and Ashur went to occupy the mountainous chain east of the Tigris, as denoted by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So this is sort of a geographically secure position. It is the exact opposite of the way that the other brother went. The other one went southeast, and he's going northwest. And perhaps Ashur is certainly something that we would have historical and geographic records of where they were. So their position would be the clue to where our starting point would be, at least in terms of searching out historic boundaries.
These are the stabilizing shape. I'm not quite following.
So,
no, I understand what it means. I'm saying, where does he get the connection between? We just had Elam and Ashur. How does he state this as denoted by, suggesting that it's suggested by the shape?
Perhaps it's the mountainous chain east of the Tigris is in and of itself is a more
is a secure position. It's, with mountains on one side and a river on one side, that's certainly a defensible place. And geographically, it seems to have been a desirous place, because Ashur was certainly a nation state that tended to grow afterwards. And what we have said about et nachta is defined by the actual shape of the note.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get a blank piece of paper. The actual shape of the note is a stable base, perhaps with something elevated above it. So we're saying Ashur has a position, and we know historically where that position is, which was a stable and perhaps defensible place, or a stable and reliable place, and it had some element of something that was elevated to it. So again, we perhaps can infer both stability and mountainous from the shape of et nachta.
That looks like a mountain.
Well, it's interesting, but Elam, it says mainly on Zagros mountains. I mean, those are mountains too.
But it doesn't have a river on the one side.
And I've never looked at those mountains. So
and the Tigris is a major river.
Yeah.
Which is, again, in terms of building a civilization, both a source of commerce and a source of water and a source of power and a source of transportation. So. And yes, I'm sure there was a lot of skiing going on.
Sand skiing, for sure.
It was not a language, sand skiing.
We will go on. The Parshat. And our Parshat, number 5, with a tipcha. So this is going to refer us slightly backwards to what's gone on from before, and be separated from what's going to go on after it. They continue to colonize, and our Parshat extended his presence further to the west. He occupied a mountainous country with lakes and rivers, bordered on the north by the southeastern coast of the Black Sea, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So again, we're trying to imply direction from the way that the notes are pointing. And I'm not,
Well, it seems in relation to the first brother. Like if southeast is down here, and the first brother is the northwest. So it's almost like pointing back to the very first.
Well, I think
in relation to the brother.
Yeah, I think last time we argued that from the Beit we realized that Kedma is forward. So Kedma, so this is facing backwards,
right.
So this is westward. Maybe.
And again, the backwards pointedness of a tipcha doesn't always direct you, especially after you're after an etnafka or self pasuk, doesn't always point you to the last word that was before it.
Sure.
It could point you to any other part of the phrase before it as well.
Sure.
And we're separated out from Vilud and Lud, who has in Cha, so it's going to go forward from there the other direction. And again, if we are trying to take directional influences and we decided that the Tipcha was west, hopefully we'll find that Lud is east. A similar landscape and condition was occupied by Lud, and Lud moved to the western part of the Turkish peninsula and settled there, as suggested by the directional shape of the reading mark. So we have to, because we're saying west, we have to define this in relationship to Elam and not in relationship to anything else. We really have to define it in relationship to the first son and where we say he settled, i.e. where the starting point of everybody was.
Right.
And you can have more than one reference point to the west of that, even though it's more east of where Ashur was, it's west of where Elam was. So I think that's the way we have to define what the notes are telling us in terms of directions.
Lud is further west compared to Ashur.
Yes. But the question is what our reference point was.
Right.
Because our Parshad, we decided we were referencing Elam, not Ashur.
Okay.
So again, we say Amercha has a loose connection to what's come from before, so it could be referencing Ashur and not referencing our Parshad or referencing Elam, but it's sort of difficult to tell. The Perush really doesn't strongly emphasize this sense of direction in anywhere other than this set of paragraphs where we're defining expansion into land by the sons of Noach. Va'aram, 7, with the stabilizing self pasuk. They expanded further, and Aram occupied land for Mesopotamia along the mountains up the Mediterranean Sea. So certainly we do have direction from Lud to continue go west towards where Aram would be along the sea. So again, the question becomes what our original reference point was, and I'm not sure. We have a pasuk in the prophets that identifies the territory of Aram. Ki Rosh Aram Damascus. The head or the main city of Aram was Damascus. So we can certainly place their territory by that reference from the V. So as we read through the sentence, again I'm going to point out that the two thoughts that we're expressing in this pasuk are, number one, that all the sons have a connection to Shem in terms of their moral influence, but then when we talk about their territory, that's something that's separated out. So we have a pause after Shem, and we have Elam with the munach that, again, is going to tell us that we're separating out and talking about a different issue now. So we started talking about moral influence, and then we're talking about territorial possessions. B'nei Shem, Elam, Ve'ashur, Ve'ar Parshad, Velud, Va'aram. And again, when we overemphasize the pauses, we can see some of that thought that we expressed in interpreting the sentence. 10:23, we're still on page 116. Uvnei, and sons of, with the tipcha, so this is going to refer us backwards to what happened from before and pause slightly afterwards. Sons of Shem built associations, and sons of Aram also lived by neighboring groupings, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So we're going to see that the way that the fathers separated themselves out and moved in terms of territorial possessions is also going to influence the way their sons tend to organize themselves. Aram, with the stabilizing et nachta. Number 2, not only was Aram large in size, but he also had most effective natural defenses, protected from all sides by the mountains and rivers from the north, east, and south, and by the sea from the west, as stressed by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. And again, we're going to interpret the et nachta as a stable base from which to create a productive and growing society. So again, we see that stability with the ability to grow and expand, or to become great within those borders at least. Not necessarily to grow and expand those borders, but to expand in numbers within those borders. So now we're going to define Aram's children. Uts, so it's lightly connected to the father Aram, but mostly bringing us forward into a description of the sons and how they settled. He apportioned his country to all of his sons under the leadership of his oldest son, Uts, in order to obtain the maximum of cooperation and fortify the human reserves, like the material supplies, as denoted by the directional shape of the reading mark. So, Uts and Otsam are sort of strength or greatness. So he says that the older son takes a leadership role, sort of both by the light connection from the Mercha to the fact that he is a son of Aram from before, also from sort of the implied meaning of the name, and the fact that everybody else is going to flow forward out of the idea that Uts is going to project. So we can see multiple sort of references to leadership and strength there. V'chul, and chul, number 4 with the tipcha. So this is going to close the phrase and pause slightly afterwards. Under the supervision and in consultation with the oldest brother, and chul, who was in succession, would share and replace the chief when it would be required, as suggested by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. So we have sort of a closed phrase here, Uts v'chul, Mercha and tipcha. So we're saying that these are the sons of Chul had the ability to step into leadership roles just like Uts had as well, but these two would be separated out from the other sons, so that there weren't necessarily leadership roles apportioned to them. The Geter and Gether with a Mercha, so lightly connected to those who are before, but mostly moving forward to what's going to go on. Number 5, the general command dealt with problems concerning the entirety of Aram. The Geter, who was the third in line, was in charge of his assigned district as expressed by the directional shape of the reading mark. So while he's got a light connection to Uts and Chul, he's mostly concerned about his own things and moves forward from there. Va Mash and Mash, with the stabilizing sof pasuk, and Mash, the youngest son of Aram, taking instruction from the oldest brother, controlled his own region at the same time. So again, we get the idea of being self-sufficient, being influenced still by what has come before, and perhaps not taking so much of a leadership role other than within your own borders. So as we read through the sentence, the phrase Uts v'chul with the pause after the tipcha is going to separate out those two sons who had leadership roles, and the other sons who looked after their own things but weren't necessarily so much of an influence on the rest of the family.
Sorry to go back. So which are the ones that took the leadership roles? Like Aram?
Three and four. So Aram is the father.
Right.
And then we're defining
Aram,
his
right.
four sons.
Right.
Utz, Chul,
Right.
Geter, and Mush.
Right.
So
who's
Utz, the Chul, Merchat, Kipcha, those two are joined together, and then there's a pause after them. So those are the two. Utz is mostly the one who's the leader, but Chul also had some share in that because he's connected backwards by the Tikva. And then those two are separated out from the other two sons. So as we read through, that pause after the Chul, again, sort of defines what we're saying in the Perush here. Uvnei, Aram, Utz, V'chul, V'geter, V'amash. 1024, page 117.
This is Utz, not Oops, right?
V'ar Parshad, Tipcha. So this is going to connect us backwards, and we would expect that because we're talking about Bnei Aram. So this is yet another of the sons of Aram, and then we're going to define his progeny. V'ar Parshad. The sons of Shem have chosen their lands with beautiful views, and Arpachshad was living in a most picturesque environment of mountains, rivers, and lakes. By the surrounding, he was stimulated for meditation, thinking, and observations, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading line. And again, when I read this, I really found it to be a little difficult to put all of that into the tipcha that was there. We have defined geographically by sentence 1022 where this son is living. So 1022, number 5, Arpachshad extended his presence further to the west. He occupies a mountainous country with lakes and rivers, and by the Black Sea and so on. So geographically, we know what that area was. But again, other than the tipcha referring it back to a prior reference to Arpachshad and his geographical location, I don't quite get the idea of meditation and thinking and observations. I don't know of any historical record of Arpachshad. I don't think that that's a common archaeological name that many people have studied. Certainly the geographical location has historical records, but I really don't think they go back that far. I mean, I'm not an archaeologist, but it was just a little puzzling to me as to whether this was interpretive based on just the geography rather than anything else. So once we've defined a geographical location, then we've defined what's typical to that geographical location.
His name is also very unusual. Very unusual name. In terms of the number of syllables and the structure, it doesn't usually fit at all. It sounds much more like a Persian name than it does anything like that. You know, 3 syllables and all that.
Agreed. It does not have a typical Hebrew root to it. It would be very difficult to parse that and decide what the makor of that word is, what the source is.
And most of the other words are 3 or 4 letters, or 1 or 2 syllables.
2 syllables.
This is
yeah.
Arpachshad, right? But you all be keeping fun of him.
I will try and look at the Midrash, the Shabbos, and see if I can find anything more about him. But it wasn't in Midrash Hagadol, so I'll have to look at some of the other Midrashim and see if there are any further descriptions of him. but we're going to go on. Yalad. So this has enough. So this is separated out from what's come from before. And we've said that we're talking about progenitors and then what comes from them. So of course we're separating out the progenitor from what is going to happen afterwards. Produced, number 2. By this attitude of admiration of scenic beauty, beauty resulting reflections, he produced the personality of his son as indicated by the shape of the reading mark. And again, what we're saying is he made something different of his son because of the way that he was. So again, I found a little bit of difficulty here because